You're listening to the Gambling Gauchos, part of the Stake in the Plains Content Network, and the Dave Campbell's Republic of Football podcast feed. Just a couple of casino caballeros talking Texas Tech, betting on the Big 12 and beyond. Now, here's Kyle Jacobson and Rob Bro live from the Cardinal Sports Center studio.
Welcome into the Gambling Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Kyle Jacobson here with Spencer Lenton from the BYU Sports Nation. Spencer, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, great. Good to be with you guys, and good to be talking Big 12 football. I know specifically Texas Tech and BYU, but just good to be part of the Big 12, man. It's been a long time coming, and really this is like a dream come true for a lot of BYU fans to be involved in this whole process.
Well, we're certainly happy to have you all and appreciate you joining us so we can preview BYU and maybe introduce the program to some of our listeners. We've been trying to talk to somebody who covers every single Big 12 school, particularly the newcomers that, maybe there's not as much knowledge or, awareness of the history and tradition of some of those schools. So I guess let's start there. We'll get into the actual X's and O's football stuff, but tell us a little bit about the BYU program. I know, y'all were first to some of the air raid stuff, which I know is near and dear to a lot of Texas Tech fans from our days with Mike Leach. And so, just tell us a little bit about the BYU football program and what Texas Tech fans can expect from y'all as conference mates.
Well, as far as this year's team goes and the makeup of 2023 BYU football, we're starting to see offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick's true emphasis and his impact on the program now that he's been Kalani Sitake's main go-to guy as the OC for now pushing 5+ years. So it's been a long road. He had a stint at the University of Utah as a co-offensive coordinator, but he wasn't truly granted the reins to do what he wanted to do until he got to BYU. And what he wants to do is essentially return BYU to what made the Cougars, so effective for so many years, with the original drop back, crazy passing attack. And I think that's the direction that Aaron Roderick wants to go and wants to keep going. It has netted BYU back-to-back quarterbacks drafted in Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall. And they feel like Keaton Slovis, if he can return to his Pac-12 Freshman of the Year form that he showed at USC in 2019 and the early part of 2020, that they can put a third consecutive quarterback into the NFL draft. And those are lofty expectations for Slovis, but they brought him in to continue a trend that Coach Roderick wants to keep going, and that is that BYU is returning to their roots, where they are pass first, run second. They're going to play very physical up front. They've loaded up on the offensive line, try and beef up to handle the independent schedules that they had before implementing into the Big 12 this year. But that if I had to explain BYU, it's a return to the roots with the quarterback factory, guys that don't turn the ball over a lot, that know how to take calculated shots, and with a nice little play action run game mixed in. So if BYU could score 40 points a game every game, they would opt for that. What they don't want to do with the return to the roots is get into those old whack shootouts where it was 55-52 or 61-58. They're hoping that the defense is a little bit better, which is why they went out and they got a defensive coordinator in Jay Hill, who had been doing wonders at an FCS program in Weber State, made them a perennial FCS playoff contender. And he kind of came from the Kyle Whittingham tree at the University of Utah, really, really old school, high level, high energy guy on the defensive side. And they're hoping that he can turn things around on the defensive side while they maintain the pass first, run second ideals on offense. So I know that's somewhat of a summarized answer, but that's probably the best way I can shape it up is a return to the roots of the quarterback factory, and BYU is going to look to pass first. They'll run a lot of motions, a lot of different it'll look like they're running like 7 different packages when really it's just Coach Roderick with his base offense throwing in multiple looks within the base offense. So it's going to look complicated to defenses. And that's by design. He's just trying to mix up what he feels is a simple way for his guys to understand what looks like to defenses is a very, very complex offense.
Do you feel like playing an independent schedule over the last several seasons prepares you better for the Big 12 compared to maybe these AAC teams coming in because you've played so many Pac-12 games and you've played some schools in the Power 5 more often than not?
I believe that BYU is the most prepared of the new four to come in and handle the workload. And listen, there's nothing that can truly get you prepared for 10 consecutive Power 5 games in a row. You just have to do it, and then But BYU, to their credit, in the independent format, played as many as 7 Power 5 games in a season. And some of the Group of 5 teams they played were high-level teams. I mean, they were playing UCF and Boise State on a regular basis. Those teams have good football programs. They compare to Power 5 teams. So it was close, not quite what they're going to face. But yes, to answer your question, I feel like BYU, because of what they have done to ramp up the schedules, especially over the last 3 to 5 years, you throw out the 2020 year because of the COVID scenario where nobody wanted to play, right? Nobody was allowing their teams in Power 5 conferences to play BYU. But right around that, they did whatever they could do to get ready and wait for this hopeful invitation. And then it came. So I think they're the most ready of the new 4 teams, and I think the most national analysts would agree with me. I'm trying to be as objective as possible as a guy that covers BYU day in and day out, but I really do think that it matters. Like when you play more Power 5 teams on a regular basis than Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF, by nature you should be more ready for the onslaught that is coming this year with Arkansas and then 9 consecutive Big 12 games. How do you quantify it, though, is the real question. Like, how do we know? Like, do we quantify it and like, oh, BYU will win 1 or 2 more games than these other 4? Or like they'll average 5 or 6 more points per game? I don't know. That's what's hard to figure out is, sure, they feel more ready. We think they're more ready, but how does that manifest itself? I tend to believe it'll probably win BYU a game more than the other 4 teams. So if BYU is projected to win 5.5 right now by Vegas, I think that it's closer to 6.5 because of what they have dealt with in the recent past.
So just speaking for myself here, I've never been much of a big conference pride, Big 12 rah-rah guy, but that did change a little bit when Texas and OU left, and I felt like we had to all kind of coalesce a little bit. And I loved the 2021 season right after BYU and the other 3 were announced. I think y'all went 5-0 against the Pac-12 that year.
Yes, de facto Pac-12 South champions.
Yes.
Much to the chagrin of Utah fans.
Yeah, exactly.
Them up, you tell them that BYU won the Pac-12 South.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with it, because this Pac-12 versus Big 12 rivalry has formed, and so it was fun to, kind of, obviously Texas Tech is my primary fan interest, but to be able to take another interest like that and say, okay, yeah, we're going to pull for BYU over Arizona today or over Utah today, and y'all got it done in 2021. I want to ask about your head coach a little bit, because he's a guy who's been there several years, which is, something Cincinnati can't say. Dana Holgerson kind of on the hot seat in Houston, but y'all seem to have a pretty stable head coaching situation with Kalani Sitake. Sure. Some really good seasons. I think 2 double-digit win seasons. Might be fair to say last season was a little bit of a disappointment, especially after the early season win over Baylor, and kind of maybe I think y'all were maybe top 15 or top 20 after that. But
top number 12, yeah.
Yeah, so just tell us a little bit about his coaching style, coaching philosophy, and kind of where he and BYU stand in your eyes, kind of maybe relative to some of the other head coaching situations in the conference. Sure.
I think the first thing that most people will notice is he's just got an incredibly warm personality and very funny. Is great at one-liners. He's very self-deprecating. Often he'll make fun of his own diet. And you're getting, to the point where he's buying larger and larger clothes. But that he's very, very fun, engaging personality, but super intense when it comes to the football. Like when he gets inside his football element, he's very passionate, very intense. And it's been Entertaining and intriguing to watch his transition from first-year head coach and first-time head coach back in 2016 to where he is now, because things have changed. He inherited a team that had Taysom Hill and Jamal Williams, who were both seniors and who, ironically enough, are now reunited with the New Orleans Saints. But so he inherited somewhat of a full closet. He had Fred Warner on that team too, guys. I mean, we're talking about like, you want to come into a scenario and you've got all pro Fred Warner and Taysom Hill and Jamal Williams on your team. Okay, now you're working with some stuff. But what was unfortunate is it kind of felt like everything in the cupboard was, needed to be used now, and then it was gone. And so in 2017, it was full rebuild, and he had the worst season in 50 years at BYU, going 4-9 in 2017. And that just doesn't happen in Provo. That just doesn't happen. And so he had to fire his offensive coordinator, who's this beloved Heisman Trophy winner in Ty Detmer. Like, Kalani had to learn how to be the bad guy almost and to have hard conversations. And so he went through some really tough times, like pretty good first season, 9-4 with great weapons, terrible season in year number 2. But I think as difficult as that was for him emotionally, it kind of shaped him, and it was a lesson that needed to be learned, where he's like, okay, I got to go get my guys. Like I need not just buddies or like, guys that fans will be excited about. I need to go get the guys that I feel are going to be the best bet. He had to convince, the administration to invest more money when they really didn't have it. And the Big 12 invite was still 4 years out, but he kind of hunkered down and went and got some of his guys. He went and got Aaron Roderick as his offensive coordinator to follow Jeff Grimes, who's now at Baylor. And he went and figured out how to work within the bounds that BYU had given to him, which, until recently, they just didn't pay a ton. It was hard to keep good coaches at BYU because the mantra was, well, it's a blessing to be at BYU. Sometimes you just have to make sacrifices and not make as much. But he found a way to learn through those hard lessons. And I watched his disposition change to more of a business-oriented coach. He was always the personality and so kind and engaging, but I watched him almost grow up and have to deal with hard things. But ultimately, it got him to a much better place where he has his unit, his staff, and most recently, he wanted Jay Hill. He worked with Jay Hill at the University of Utah when Kalani was the defensive coordinator. Jay was the safeties coach and was doing some other things. He wanted to go get Jay Hill, and he convinced BYU's administration to pay for a defensive coordinator that was one of Kalani's guys, and he went and got him. And that's kind of a microcosm of what I've seen change. Is it went from more of like a good old boys club, former BYU guys all on the staff, to no, it's not going to work. I need to go get the best available coaches. I need to go get guys I trust that I've worked with. Doesn't matter where they've been. They don't have to all be BYU guys. We just got to figure this thing out. And so while he is still really fun and coaches love him and his energy remains high, he's more business now. And I think it needed to be that. Whereas he was just kind of trying to figure things out in 2016 and 2017. But one of my favorite people just in life, if you need something and it's like a humanitarian effort or a charitable thing, like Kalani always wants to be involved because he just he cares about people. And I really appreciate about him and what he does to try and help, represent the BYU brand. And frankly, I think that's why your coach, Joey McGuire, was so complimentary of Kalani in our recent Big 12 interviews. And most of the coaches, he's got that warm, engaging personality. And he's learned a lot. And now the real test begins as a Power 5 coach.
So let's get into the roster a little bit. You mentioned Keaton Slovis, quarterback, and you're going to be pass happy and pass first. So who are some of the skill positions and wide receiver you're going to be looking at to lean on?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Obviously, BYU leans heavily on the quarterback position. They feel like they have a guy who's finally healthy, who was injured for much of his year at Pittsburgh, but he won't tell you that because that's just not Keaton's personality. But he feels like he's finally healthy again. His shoulder's healthy. His arm is stronger than it has been in about a year and a half. And he feels like he's got the capability to make most of the throws again. So it starts there. But anytime you lose your quarterback to the NFL draft and your top receiver, Puka Nacua, who's now with the Rams, it kind of becomes like, well, gosh, like what else does BYU have left? And they have a guy named Cody Epps, who flirted with the transfer portal for a little bit and was leaning towards maybe some SEC schools, but ultimately stayed at BYU. They return a guy named Chase Roberts, who had a big game against Baylor in the win over the Bears in Provo last year, made a toe touch grab in the back of the end zone, made some big plays. He's back and healthy. And he's got a guy named Keanu Hill, whose dad played at Texas Tech. So it kind of comes full circle a little bit there, but Keanu Hill's at BYU, Texas kid, joining Chase Roberts and Cody Epps. Those will be the three primary pass catchers for Keaton Slovis. And then a name that's been slept on for a long time, I feel, because of just a gruesome ankle injury and broken lower leg injury he sustained against USC in 2021 is Isaac Rex. He was on Mel Kiper's draft board as one of the top tight ends in the country. Did not play at more than maybe 50 or 60% health last year. He's back and healthy. So Isaac Rex at tight end is going to be a name to watch out for. And then they bring in a transfer running back from UNLV named Aiden Robbins to fill a gap that didn't really get all the way filled up last year. I think they thought Chris Brooks was going to be a guy that could replace Tyler Algier, who's now with the Falcons. Just didn't work out. They feel like Robbins is more geared towards Tyler Algier's physical running style. So, in a perfect world, things are going to go great, guys, right? You got a 1,000-yard rusher. You bring back some nice weapons at receiver, and you got a tight end that at one point was a surefire NFL draft pick. They're hoping that health can maintain. So if you guys know the secret to keeping guys healthy in a schedule where you play 10 Power 5 games, please tell me so that I can help the strength and conditioning staff at BYU, because the injury bug really got BYU last year, and BYU can beat anybody, health assumed.
Yeah, no, it's a struggle for everybody.
Yes.
So I use this example with everyone. The two teams that played for the Big 12 title last year, TCU and Kansas State, both of their starting quarterbacks in that game were not their day one starting quarterbacks. And I think that's something that maybe especially the newcomers underestimate. They go, we have a star running back. Well, that's great, but you need 2, 3, 4 guys at certain positions because by game 7, game 8, they're going to have to be called upon to play a little bit, whether somebody's injured or not. I mean, there's just so many, when you play some up-tempo offenses and there's 85, 90 plays in a game, having 1 or 2 studs isn't enough. You need a deep roster. And that's why I think part of why Texas Tech has struggled so much over the last decade or so until McGuire got here. But yeah, you mentioned Keanu Hill. Lloyd Hill, I think, is a little bit victim of timing. He was here at Texas Tech before the true air raid days, and so it's Michael Crabtree and Wes Welker and those guys who get remembered. But if Lloyd Hill was in one of those Leach offenses, I mean, his numbers would have been just outrageous, just like the rest of them. So I wish we could have seen that. But
did you guys have 3 quarterbacks that all threw for 1,000 yards plus last season too?
Yeah. So our day one starter, Tyler Shuck, he got hurt in the season opener against Murray State. He came back after that to start 4 more games. So he started 5 total. And then Donovan Smith started 4 games. Baron Morton started 4 games in between. So, yeah, all 3 pretty much played the same exact amount of time. And our best player on last year's team, Tyree Wilson, he was a 7th overall pick to the Raiders. He got hurt with, I think, 2 games left in Big 12 play. And so we missed him for about the last quarter of conference schedule. So, yeah, unfortunately, it happens to everybody. And, the really good teams that rise to the top are the ones that have dudes second string on the roster, not just, top line on the depth chart. So BYU also, so I think they're sort of uniquely equipped compared to other newcomers that have made the Power 5 transition. Your quarterback has more career starts versus Power 5 competition than anybody in the Big 12, not just, among the newcomers. And your offensive line looks pretty experienced in that same respect in terms of career starts. And maybe you can help me with the pronunciation. Your best offensive lineman, Kingsley Suamataia. Am I close there?
Yeah, Kingsley Suamataia is going to be the star. Yeah, that's often the challenge, right? Like, so if we can help you, as you prepare for these games, please, like that. I'm happy to help with all of the
yes, we'll need it.
Last names. I've been studying these for the last decade plus, and feel pretty confident in it. But yeah, Kingsley Suamataia is going to lead the charge there for BYU's offensive line. And he's been projected everywhere from number 9 overall in the first round of next year's NFL draft to number 28. We anticipate that he's probably going to go, but Connor Payet center, and then an influx of some new guys, but they come from, different places. Paul Miley was at Utah last year on that Rose Bowl team. He played center for Utah's Rose Bowl team. He's now at BYU. And then Caleb Etienne comes from Oklahoma State. His grades were not good, according to Pro Football Focus last year. Didn't leave exactly on great terms with Mike Gundy, but he comes to Provo with a new, refreshed outlook, and hopefully he can rediscover something special because his frame is incredible. And then he joins a core of, some BYU guys that do have some experience and should be okay. But yeah, I mean, your observation is astute. While BYU lost a great left tackle, they should be okay. And they should be able to create a push up front. And if there's one position group that I feel like actually has depth ready for the Big 12, it's probably BYU's offensive line. Outside of that, we're hoping that health remains good for BYU. But the offensive line, I feel like that group is ready, is depth tested and ready for the Big 12.
All right, let's hit the defensive side. Who are some players to watch for on the defense, along the trenches and in the backfield there?
On the defensive side of the ball, the biggest question mark, I can tell you right now, is BYU's defensive line. I know that Tyler Batty's getting some preseason accolades as a guy that will be second or third team all Big 12. But, man, and I can't paint it in either picture, but BYU's lack of disruption up front on defense in the front seven last year was just straight up bad. Like, they just could not get to the quarterback. One of the worst teams in the country in quarterback sacks, in those disruptive plays and creating chaos and havoc. It just was really, really not there. And it cost BYU. And frankly, it cost their defensive coordinator, Elisa Tuiaki, his job, which is why they had to bring in Jay Hill. But Tyler Batty anchors that defensive line now. They got a transfer from Boise State named Isaiah Banya, who they feel like is going to be a star, like to rival Tyler Batty on the opposite side of the defensive line. And they're going to do some nice work, we hope, to help get to the quarterback a little bit more. New scheme, new defensive lineup, new defensive coordinator. So that should help them also kind of just throw in some more blitz packages. Probably means giving up more big plays on the back end because BYU is going to be more aggressive, and they want to let the big dogs eat, to steal an oft-used cliche. But at linebacker, they add an experienced linebacker from Utah State named AJ Vongpachan. He'll join Ben Bywater, a guy who had a pick six that really won BYU's bowl game for him last year in the New Mexico Bowl. Sorry, my kids are yelling outside. I'm sure they're getting really excited about all this BYU football talk. But they're trying to break down my defense right here.
Yeah, there you
go. They're not getting through. So those are some of the new names. The best defender, I think, on BYU's team right now is actually a transplant from Weber State University, and he follows Jay Hill. His name is Eddie Heckard. He comes as an FCS All-American, a dude that you could see playing on Sundays in the NFL at corner. I think he's BYU's best skilled defender right now. His ability to cover one-on-one. He'll be out on an island often. Eddie Heckard's probably, I think, BYU's most skilled and accomplished individual defender. So he probably tops the list, but that list of names I just gave to you, just a lot of transplants. it's a new age. I mean, BYU going into the Big 12, it was like, all right, what can we go get in the transfer portal to try and help this defense that I think, according to Bill Connolly's SP Plus final season projections, was like 109th out of 131 teams. I mean, and bottom 40 in the country in most major defensive statistical categories. So the good news is for BYU fans that it can't get much worse. And
we said that year after year. And it can't get worse.
You would be surprised.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
Touche.
Yeah.
Maybe I should knock on wood somewhere. Like,
yeah, there you
go. But they feel like in some ways they bottomed out last year, and now there's room to just get better with a new defensive coordinator. And there's new energy. I mean, sometimes you need a hard reset, right? It just you needed it with Joey McGuire. You go from Matt Wells to Joey McGuire, and the hard reset, it's what you need. It's what a program needs. Yeah. And I think BYU's defense should have that. So I don't know, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I'd love to see BYU's defense go from 109th overall to, gosh, if they were top 75 guys, then BYU's probably a bowl team. They probably win 7 games. And I don't know, maybe my blue goggles are on. I'm trying to be the opti-realist here and think about what is actually like a reachable goal for BYU. And I think they can be a top 75 defense, which when I say that just kind of sounds pathetic, but it's where we are right now.
We get it.
Well, we'll leave you with one more question and then let you get back to your family. I think I speak for a lot of Texas Tech fans when they saw the Big 12 schedule come out. Everybody looks for like one big away game or road trip, and I know a lot of them circled Provo on the schedule and are going to make plans to attend that one. So for Texas Tech fans that have never been out that way, can you tell us what we need to know about the city of Provo, the game day atmosphere and experience, and all that good stuff?
You bet. Not very difficult to get into Provo, especially from, I think you might have to. I'm trying to think, where do most flights connect in Lubbock? Is it through American Airlines? You go through Dallas and then up to Salt Lake City? Is that how that typically works? Because it shouldn't be that difficult of a flight. But once you get into Salt Lake City, about a 45-minute drive south on Interstate 15. And you guys have seen the pictures. I don't know if your fans have seen the pictures. But the pictures do not do it justice. When you get up in that press box on a fall afternoon, and the sun is hitting the back mountain, like the backsplash of mountains, and those fall colors, those trees are lighting up. It is, and I'm probably biased here, but it has to be one of the top 3 most beautiful backdrops in all of college football. I've been to a lot of stadiums, and there are some incredible backdrops. But when you see how close to the mountains the Llewellyn Edwards Stadium is set in the fall, temperatures in the mid-60s, the high 70s, little breeze coming out of the mouth of the canyon. And it is a spectacular college football setting. So I'm excited for Texas Tech fans to visit the stadium. In fact, I was talking to Joey McGuire's sweet wife at Media Days in Texas, and she mentioned to me, she's like, all of my kids want to go to Provo because they've seen the pictures. They want to experience that stadium. We're just hoping it's not an 8:15 kick. And I said, hey, just make sure you're there an hour and a half before. You'll still get the full grandeur of that backdrop, and you'll see what that stadium can bring and is all about. But I think Keaton Slovis said it best when he was at USC in a podcast when he was explaining what Provo is like as an opposing quarterback. And he's like, dude, it was so weird because they were nice to me. Like I was expecting them to boo me, and they did exactly the opposite. And I thought that was like, so he's like, it played even more of a mental game with me. It was weird. But just nice fans. Honestly, Texas Tech, I think, is going to have a great season, guys. I mean, it's just from my outside perspective. I feel like you were picked 4th. I legitimately would put you in the top 3. I think Texas Tech's going to be great this year. If you come into Provo and beat BYU on their homecoming night, the BYU fans will congratulate you the whole way to the bus. Like that's just how it goes. Like, hey, great game. We'll be rooting for you the rest of the way. You were awesome tonight. Your coach is awesome. Your quarterback is an incredible player. Like, they'll be disappointed that BYU lost, but they will see you. And it's like their coping mechanism. Like, I'm going to cope by being kind and wishing them well the rest of the way. And they legitimately will root for, if you beat BYU, they will root for you to win every game the remainder of the season. And it is genuine. So call it weird, call it whatever, but I anticipate that Texas Tech fans, and if you guys are there, you will find that Provo is a great place to watch college football game. A lot of great food. Make sure you get the 18-inch maple bar donut. It's called a Cougar Tail. Bam Bam's Barbecue, according to Andre Ware, the great Andre Ware from Houston, who won the Heisman Trophy, and Adam Amin, who's a guy who's been on ESPN, is calling NFL games. Those two guys are like, it's the best barbecue west of the Mississippi, And I know that's sacrilege when you talk to Texas guys, right? Sacrilege, but their words. So Bam Bam's Barbecue, great place to check out. J Dog's, great restaurant to check out. And then make sure you get that, the chocolate mint brownie that's served at the stadium, or the 18-inch maple bar donut called the Cougar Tail. Maybe some BYU Creamery ice cream. You're all set. Frankly, if you're sitting in the students or the visitor section, they pass out free ice cream in the third quarter. So to the opponents.
I love Provo.
So hey, even you're kicking BYU's butt, say you're up 3 touchdowns, like, hey, you're playing well, have some ice cream too. It's just the way they do things. But yeah, I think Texas Tech fans and all the Big 12 fans, if you're traveling to Provo, you'll enjoy the scenery, the setting, the people, and a great football environment. Utah is a college football state, with Utah and BYU leading the charge there. We love college football, and we're so excited to be in the Big 12. So yeah, come and enjoy. And if you win, then just expect to be complimented the whole way out.
Well, we can't wait. We're looking forward to it.
As am I. Appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Tell the people where they can find you and follow along.
Okay, so I host a daily show on BYU TV. It's on Sirius XM channel 143, so it's a simulcast. We call it Radio Vision, but so you can listen to us on podcast, live on Sirius XM, or you can watch the show on BYU TV, which is available in 70 million homes nationwide. Typically, it's free in most simple cable packages. You can also stream it online, BYUSN.com, but that is 11 a.m. Central Time and 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Every day, we're coming up on episode 2600. We've been doing it almost 10 years daily. Wow. We're the only live show on BYU TV and BYU Radio on a daily basis. And we're so grateful to be in the position we are. But yeah, BYUSN.com is the place to go for anything you might need. And I'm sure we'll be asking you guys at some point to probably hop on and preview the Red Raiders as we approach October 21st.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, you got it, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Spencer.
All right, that was Spencer Lenton from BYU Sports Nation. Really enjoyed that talk. I'm so excited for BYU. I know all the schools are going to be great, but I really am excited about BYU, and I think they can make a good transition here. All right, Kyle, let's get on to it. I did go to Reginio Barbecue today, and they have the new brick and mortar open. So that's great. They're going to be open. See if I remember this. I texted it to you so I'd remember. Tuesdays through Saturdays, 11 to 8. That's the barbecue restaurant. And then the market, which is kind of next door but in the same building, they've got some fresh produce. They've got some sandwiches, salads, chips, milk. They've got some ice cream on the way. The barbecue market, they called it. They've got some sides, the cream corn, the potato salad, the mac salad, all of those things, 7 days a week. So you can go to Reginio Barbecue 7 days a week now.
And apparently they have some competition west of the Mississippi for the title of best barbecue.
That's true. Some competition.
So yeah, I'm interested to compare notes when we go to Provo. We've got now dueling barbecue restaurants. We have a comment about the flatness of Lubbock versus that scenic mountain backdrop that almost brought a tear to my eye as Spencer was describing it. And then of course the fan experience. Like, I'm not sure. I mean, I've told people in Lubbock, good game, after taking the L, but I've never given anybody free ice cream or like gone up and shook their hand and like, oh, we just love your coach. So yeah, I feel like going to a football game in Provo might be a totally separate universe type feeling, but I look forward to it.
Absolutely. And looking forward to some new things maybe in 2024 as we get that news today.
Yeah. I mean, where do you want to even start with all that? I feel like any realignment always just, it's domino after domino. So where do you want to go with that conversation?
Let's, oh man, how aggressive do we want to be here? Do we want to go back to Wilner's conversation? Do we want to go back to some of the Canzano stuff we've read? Do we want to talk about Tony Altimore? Or do we just say, like we thought all along, Colorado knew that the Big 12 was a better direction and they've joined the party? Do we want to take the high road, Kyle?
I mean, we always do, right?
We always do.
The high road gauchos. So I'll say this. Going back 2 years ago, when Texas and OU left, I was like, we got to get to the Pac. Like, that's where the USC, UCLA, Oregon. And when it became clear that they had no interest in that, I was like, well, I don't know what you do now. I guess what you did, which is cobble together the best from the group of five and make do with that. And then a year later, USC, UCLA do exactly what Texas and OU did. And I'm thinking, like, okay, are we looking at like a merger now, or are they going to rethink expansion, or are we going to be able to pull some of them from the Pac-12 to the Big 12? And the more this went on, I mean, I guess my thoughts on it sort of ebbed and flowed based on the news cycle of that week or month. But for the most part, I thought that the Pac-12 would stay at 10 teams and just sign a bad TV deal, whether that was giving up some money or giving up exposure by going streaming. And so I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I knew all along that Colorado was coming, because I thought they would do what they did last time, which was make a financially bad move. I think it has been calculated they lost about $70 million over the last decade by being in the Pac instead of the Big 12.
Yep.
But at the same time, I can say I wasn't fully right on this. Now, if the Pac-10 just adds SMU and then all this is over, like, that's not a huge landscape shift type realignment, and maybe you could say, okay, well, the Pac-10 is more or less intact. So I'm not going to sit here and say I was right all along. But I also, for the last year on Twitter, wasn't calling anybody else who disagreed with me a conspiracy theorist, 12 and on, clickbaiter, liar, truck stop, flyover, academics, yada, yada, yada. And so I'm not a professional at this. I'm a fan who has a podcast. But there were professionals whose names are John Canzano. I was re-listening to this before coming on the pod today. Mid-June, he's doing his Canzano and Wilner podcast. And he explicitly says, when all this is over with, and he's, of course, under the impression that the Pac-12 is going to sign a deal and there's going to be no movement. He said, we need to have accountability for YouTube clickbaiters and people who were lying to try to destabilize the Pac and blah, blah, blah. Now, is he referring to people like us? I don't know. Is he referring to like MH Ver? But he brought up what I think is like a borderline conspiracy theory that the consultant working with the Big 12 was being paid to undermine the Pac-12 and get these news headlines out there that were incorrect or misleading only to destabilize the Pac-12. And so if we're calling for accountability, let's go to the people who said there's no way any Pac-12 school is going to leave for the Big 12, that it can't happen. Nobody's ever left the better academic conference for the worst academic conference. At least one is coming. And if we are to believe there's a domino, I mean, we might really be dunking on these guys a couple weeks from now. And so I'm not the one saying like it's time to go dunk on everybody. I hope you kept your receipts. They're the ones who have been saying for months now, we're going to have accountability when all this is over with. Like, okay, well, it's go time. Like, and all John Canzano has said for himself today was an eyeball emoji at the news that Colorado was leaving. And so he's probably going to cower away from taking any accountability on this. And who knows what justification he'll have or spin he'll have. There are others. Altamore blocked us for insinuating but not saying that he was paid off by the Pac-12. I'm sure this USC guy, who's now a Big Ten fan, was just making all these misleading graphs and charts on Twitter for no reason at all. But anyway, that
by the way,
do what?
Still is.
That's kind of my thought on it right now is like, clearly the people who were absolutists on this and said nobody's ever going to leave, the Big 12 is not going to add anyone, were wrong. And I'll also say on Canzano, just he's the one I was listening to before doing this episode with you, had such a condescending view toward Yormark and saying things like, I'm doing my best to paraphrase accurately, but like, well, maybe that was his only shot at this, or strategy was to go the destabilize route. And, he's this salesman guy. And so we expect this from him. And it was like this pat on the head, like, well, you fired the only shot in your chamber. You did all you could, but still nobody's coming to the Big 12. And I'm like, you guys have been led to believe by your own commissioner that this deal is coming in 2 weeks, after Christmas, before spring break, after the tournament, 2 weeks, soon, the near future. And it has never come. So don't tell me that our commissioner is a snake oil salesman. Our commissioner has a TV deal, and our commissioner is on the verge, probably as of tomorrow morning, going to have poached a school from your conference. And your commissioner, Pac-12, was the one saying, well, I haven't decided if I'm going to go shopping in the Big 12 yet. So if it's time for reckoning and accountability and all that, let's do it. The only thing I ever put out there was Pac-12 versus Big 12 apples-to-apples TV ratings, and I knew what the data said. I knew that more people watch the Big 12 when you control for all the proper variables. So if it's accountability time, let's go. And we'll start with John Canzano, TJ Altamore, and George Kliavkoff.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you know who needs to be held accountable? George Kliavkoff, because he is in Bob Bowlesby territory of ruining a conference. And they all crowned him after Larry Scott because Larry Scott was so dadgum bad that, Larry Scott killed the conference. Anything that Kliavkoff is doing is just coming back from what Larry Scott buried us in. No, Kliavkoff doesn't own a shovel. He can't dig you out. He's stuck in the mud and doesn't know what to do with it. And at every turn, he's been wrong. Or your presidents didn't allow him to do anything. When Texas and Oklahoma left, he could have expanded, but USC and UCLA said no. Then they left, and he could have expanded, but Stanford and Cal said no. Every step, this guy's been wrong. He doesn't know what he's doing. He has been lying, and if anyone is going around spreading disinformation, as they like to call it, they're in Pac-12 land, it's the Pac-12 writers who have known all along, I'm sure, that nothing is coming, and they still say it again and again and again. Nothing's coming. There's no deal. There's no deal.
The deal is it's buried somewhere underground next to Jimmy Hoffa. Like, that's where the deal is. There's no deal. It was never 2 weeks away.
Ever.
Okay, I'll backtrack. I bet they had an offer that they knew was so bad it wasn't palatable, and so they never formalized it. And they were like, oh, well, we'll go find a different partner, or we'll go back to the table and get 10% more, or we'll play on Fridays. And so George kept telling them, hey, just wait 2 more weeks. Like, we're almost there. And this super brain genius academic conference with all the West Coast Ivy League schools, or whatever they call Stanford, West Coast Ivy, was apparently either too dumb to figure that out, or they were just in on the misleading and misinformation.
They don't care. They don't care about athletics. This is an athletics deal to do a TV market for athletics games, and they do not care about athletics. They're like, oh, we have to go to another athletics meeting about this athletics TV thing. Why? Why do we have to do this again?
The other thing, not to pile on Canzano, but he's just kind of been at
Pile.
the forefront of this.
Pile.
Go off, King. Do you know what the term unfalsifiable means?
I could put it together, I think.
Like, I'm not trying to get political, but like on climate change, for example, like if there are more hurricanes, that's because of climate change. If there are no hurricanes, that's because of climate change. If it's really hot, climate change. If it's really cold, climate change. So it's an unfalsifiable, the way it's used sometimes. Like you can never prove or disprove it because like no matter what the weather is outside, it's climate change. That's what Canzano did, but it was like no matter what happened. You remember that the headline format he ran, it was like, why this is actually bad for the Big 12. And it was like, so to refresh everybody's memory, the Big 12's TV deal expires a year after the Pac-12's. It was set to before, all the motion on this. So if in a relative sense, if everybody was on the same timeline, the Pac-12 would be exactly 1 year ahead of the Big 12. And like 2 weeks after, I think the Pac-12 started renegotiating their deal, the Big 12 announced it was opening its exclusive window. And it was like, well, what took so long? It's like, well, we're 11 and a half months ahead of you guys. And then it was like, okay, the Big 12 gets a deal, and I think it was announced in October. At this point, the Pac-12 has been at it about 3 or 4 months, no deal. And he goes, well, they hurried, they went too fast, and they left a lot of money on the table, so the Pac-12 will get a more lucrative deal. Well, here we are 9 months after that, and George just said last week, the longer they wait, the better it gets. So it must be getting super sweet. And if that's true, I mean, wait till the day before next college football season starts to sign it. Maybe they'll pass the Big Ten and the SEC. But Canzano was also the one like, oh, well, they didn't really get started on this till December because they were still trying to see if UCLA would come back. And he's also the guy that was like, well, if they want to go to 14, they can add Rice because there's 3 million television sets in Houston. And it became apparently obvious this guy has no clue what he's talking about. That's not how it works. If you add Rice to the Pac-12, there aren't 3 million TV sets in Houston that just flip onto the Rice football game. Like the trouble with that is that nobody in Houston wants to watch Rice football. Otherwise, it would have been in the Big Ten a long time ago. Like Big Ten could have had a Houston foothold. If it was that simple, Rice meets the academic criteria for the Big Ten. And so he's just like, oh, well, like Colorado leaves, just add Colorado State and, add the Houston market with Rice. It's like, dude, Alabama doesn't get ratings because the Tuscaloosa TV market has a bunch of TV sets. They get ratings because they're really good at football and everybody in the country wants to watch them. And so his reporting, it became clear he had probably 1 or 2 sources from the schools in the Pac-10 least likely to have a life raft if things went wrong. And so he's like, oh, well, the Washington State president told me that everything is fine and that the deal is 2 weeks away. He just reported that over and over, no matter what the news was, why this is actually good for the Pac-12 that USC is leaving and why it's actually good for the Pac-12 that, their games are going to be on ION or the CW, and why it's actually good for the Pac-12 that the Big 12 has more money than the ACC. It's just ridiculous stuff. And again, this is the guy most loudly calling for accountability on how people have commented and reported on this whole realignment saga.
And you have guys like Stuart Mandel, who talked about the Big 12 carcass early on in the storyline, and you have Pac-12 fans saying, "Well, why are Big 12 fans talking about our death? Why are they so mean to us?" Well, for one, Big 12 fans are mean. They're toxic, except for BYU fans. Everyone else is mean. Get used to it. Maybe passionate is a better word, but it still fires me up that Mandel and Canzano and Wilner were so wrong for so long. And then you have guys like Brett McMurphy, who they were clowning, and Dennis Dodd, who was wrong early and then self-corrected because he's smart and figured it out as well. But I don't know. The whole thing is just so gratifying that Colorado allegedly is coming to the Big 12, and now allegedly, Oregon is on the books.
Well, yeah, I want to get into that in a minute. You said something else that reminded me of, I guess I forgot. I'm going to re-listen to this whole Kenzano and Wilner podcast. Oh, it was Mandel. He said the Big 12, he said $12 million per year is ambitious for the Big 12, and you wound up getting like triple that basically.
Yeah.
$32 million on TV plus the bowl payouts, the March Madness payouts. Yeah, talked about the carcass of the Big 12. The Big 12, when Texas and OU left, so Colorado and Nebraska left first, and then A&M, Mizzou to the SEC, and then Texas OU to the SEC. Not a single time did any national reporter shed a tear, say, well, this is bad for college football, the over-consolidation. We shouldn't be rooting for the demise of a conference. And then when it happens to the Pac-12 for the first time, it's like, well, this isn't good for the sport, and all college football fans should be upset about this. It's like, no. Like, had you not done this to us, literally left us for dead, I wouldn't have – like, I don't have beef with the Pac-12. I don't really know or care about any schools out there. I mean, I want Arizona to be in the same conference as Tech, which I'll get into in a minute, but I don't have animosity towards Stanford or Oregon State. I mean, I'm just, like, totally neutral towards them. But when your fans on Twitter basically say, there was a Cal fan. He said that people in the middle of the United States do not conduct themselves with enough class to be in the Pac-12. He was like, well, from my experience living in California, there's a certain amount of class that we're accustomed to. The academic stuff, you're too stupid to be in our conference, more or less. Mm-hmm. The truck stop, the flyover. I mean, just straight up condescension, name-calling. And they're like, oh, well, why are you guys being so mean to us? Like, well, like, sorry, there's a bit of a chip on our shoulder from the last decade plus of everything. And I know your nose was so high that you could have drowned in a rainstorm. But in John Canzano's words, like, it's accountability time, it's reckoning time. So sorry if we weren't nice enough to you on Twitter after you just, like, shat on the places that we're all from and the people we all associate with and the schools we all attended. I'm sorry we weren't nicer to you, but not really.
Yeah, not really at all. Ryan says, take their credentials. Shelly says, not mean, proud, still a downfall. Jackson says, Kyle spitting. I think that was during the climate change talk.
The part that I do find legitimately funny is the academic chest pounding and then how stupid they played their hand of cards in this. Like, if you're going to browbeat everybody about how much smarter you are, maybe don't operate like the dumbest of the Power 5 conferences.
I mean, you hear the saying, oh, he's playing 4D chess while they're playing checkers. The Pac-12 has been playing checkers. What's dumber than checkers?
Tiddlywinks.
They've been playing pull the stick. And you know that game with the marbles and you pull the stick and then you try to keep the marbles on top? I mean, they just – backgammon? What is it? What is the dumbest game? Mancala? They don't know what they're doing. Mahjong? That's just a matching game, right? They've been playing Candyland over there.
Rob, get the air horn ready. Do you have it ready?
Yeah.
I've got 2 words for you, George Kliavkoff. Go fish!
It's just a brutal. Like, you're going to look back at the 30 for 30 on the Pac-12 and say, how did they miss so bad at every turn? I mean, they could have gotten 4 Big 12 schools initially when Texas, Oklahoma were left for dead or merged. They could have merged and had the Pac-20, and you could have been done with it and left 3 schools behind or 4 schools behind. So, and been the best conference you could have been.
That is the funniest part to me is, like, because they didn't expand, they could have delivered the death blow to the Big 12.
They had every opportunity.
By taking 4, 6, 8, whatever. And I'm not trying to talk down on any schools, but, like, it's funny to me that UCF in the Big 12 is going to make more money than Florida State in the ACC. It's like you left us no choice but to elevate UCF and Cincinnati to the Power 5. And now schools like Oregon State, Washington State that have been in the Power 5 or whatever its former version was for almost a century, in the Pac-8 or whatever it was called, like you're now going to be relegated because of your own hubris. You were too good to associate with Texas Tech and Oklahoma State and BYU because they're Mormon. And now, like, sorry, we moved on. We're with UCF and Cincinnati and BYU and Houston, and y'all can come to the Big 12 if you want, if you bring pro rata like Colorado does. But otherwise, like, sorry, Cal, sorry, Oregon State, you had your shot twice and didn't take it. So,
and I don't want to let Arizona off. I don't want to let Colorado off. They could have come initially. They had the opportunities a year later when USC left. They could have bailed on the Pac-12 a year ago and been here this year. They could have made the move this year. But no, we got to wait around another season. I guess they would have been waiting around a season anyways, but still could have been listed.
And this is a good segue because I think we both want to speculate on what comes next. If Colorado comes, which has been reported as like 98% happening tomorrow, Thursday morning, let's assume a domino falls and one more team comes with them, whether it's Arizona or whoever. Like at that point, you would think, unless Oregon and Washington have like Big Ten invites and, like, so I'm not talking about those schools, but you would think Utah and Arizona State and Oregon State, whoever, are like crawling over broken glass for a 50% share in the Big 12 because there's no more Pac-12. You can't have an 8-team conference, and you can't add UNLV, Colorado State, and SMU to make it all go away. So that's where I would maybe this isn't the way you get off on the right foot with new conference members, but if I'm Yormark, I'm like, yeah, you can come to the Big 12 for a 25% payout, Utah. Like, we've been inviting you for a year, and you could have come for pro rata 100%, what everybody else got, and you were too good for it. So now your option is to go to the Mountain West or 25% of the Big 12, take it or leave it.
And that's still more money than what the Pac-12 is going to make.
Yeah, I mean, like if there is a Pac-12 entity, I don't know if there will be, depending on how many dominoes fall.
That's one thing that I think will always exist is the Pac something. I think I don't think the Mountain West would eat the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 would eat the Mountain West.
But it's like, first off, the Pac brand at this point is a meme. And
not
like,
to them.
Well,
not to national writers. There's still a lot of history there.
I guess there's
all gone
voices in their heads, but like, so is San Diego State going to pay $34 million to basically just go to a rebranded Pac-12 that's not a power conference?
Yeah,
maybe. I guess we'll see, but
I think State would finally accept that offer.
Yeah, I don't know, man. All right, so let's get wild with speculation. And I don't know if you want to talk about what we were told a couple weeks ago, maybe coming to fruition here, or if we don't want to get into that on the podcast. But
yeah, let's do it.
So 2 weeks ago, I think July 13th, we got a call and a text saying that like Colorado was a done deal. I don't know if it was a done deal 2 weeks ago, but it certainly gave off the impression like, yes, they're committed to joining the Big 12. I think they said that there was like, the legal paperwork, all that crap to do before we got to this point today where it's being widely reported as a done deal. And if you remember it the same way, we were told that UConn was still very much in the picture and like they might be next, and that the Big 12 was holding spots for Oregon and Washington, which like, is that significant? It sounds significant, but also kind of no duh, right? The Big 12 isn't going to say, oh, shucks, we filled up on spots. Sorry, Oregon and Washington, we don't have any room for you. Right. So like, does that actually mean anything? I don't know, but that was what we were told. Those were the teams. It was UConn, Oregon, and Washington. Not that they're coming to the Big 12, but those were just school names that were relayed to us on a phone call. At the same time, we were told that Colorado was like all in on this.
Yeah, and I don't hate UConn if that's the next school, but I hate UConn if that's the last school. Does that make sense?
I think so.
If UConn is a part of a basketball conference that also has Arizona, or a part of a football conference that also has Oregon, I'm not so upset. But if UConn is the next team and then the last team, and you don't grow anymore after that, like soon, I think that's a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, my answer is the same as I can't remember who we were talking with, but they kind of asked us like what we wanted to see next. And I said, like, I want some closure with the Pac-12 before you look at UConn? Like, is Colorado the only one coming? Do you have 2 schools, 4 schools, 6 schools coming? I think the only ones that you would say no thanks to would be like Oregon State and Washington State. Because I think like even if one or both of Stanford and Cal said, hey, we want in the Big 12, which I don't think is going to happen, you would have to be like, okay, well, like, yeah, do we want into California? Stanford's a really big brand. I don't know. But I would make sure that you run the traps west before thinking about UConn. And then when it's all said and done, whether you have a 14 team or an 18 team Big 12, if you want to look at UConn, maybe with Gonzaga, if you have enough teams out west as basketball only, if you have a basketball conference that has Gonzaga, Arizona, Kansas, Houston, Baylor, and UConn in it, that's pretty serious. And that's to say nothing of like Iowa State and Oklahoma State's history, Texas Tech's run over the last 5 years or so. BYU, I think, has kind of decent history. Oregon is – so I don't know. Like you start thinking about all that and it gets kind of crazy. But to the Oregon-Washington part of this, those are kind of like the crown jewels that are out there. Jason Scheer, who, by the way, cue the dashboard confessional, he is vindicated to a great extent today. He kind of hinted like there's a school not in the Four Corners that is looking pretty hard at Big 12 membership right now. I don't know if he meant Oregon or Washington. I don't know if that's been clarified since. But it sounds like there could be something beyond just Colorado or just Colorado and Arizona. What do you think could happen? What do you want to see happen out west?
My dream is still 4 Pac-12 schools. And if right now it's Arizona, Oregon, and Washington joining Colorado, I am all in. All in on that. If it's just one more school and Oregon ditches Washington for the sure thing, and Washington wants to sit on their hands and wait for the Big Ten still, good luck. Because I think if Oregon joins, you would be able to go back to the table with some TV partners and maybe say, hey, we have Oregon now. What else can we do?
Yeah, so the Big Ten keeps coming up with Oregon and Washington, and I get big time Kansas and Big Ten vibes. Like Kansas fans probably right now still think they have a shot at Big Ten membership. And the reality is the Big Ten could have invited them in 2010, in 2011, and 2012, or at any point over the last few years, and they haven't. Like, sorry, but when USC and UCLA got invitations to the Big Ten, if the Big Ten wanted 4 schools on the West Coast, they would have just invited Oregon and Washington at that time. It tells me that either Oregon and Washington aren't valuable enough to pull their weight in the media contract, or USC and UCLA told them, we don't want Big Ten competition on the West Coast. We want to be your exclusive flagship on the West Coast. And so Oregon and Washington are off the table, and Stanford for that matter. And so I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, well, if Arizona and Arizona State also join the Big 12, then Oregon and Washington will just jump to the Big 10. Like, they don't have an invitation. They've never had one. If the Big 10 wanted them, they would be in the Big 10. Unless they work some kind of deal where the Big 10 says, hey, you've got nowhere left to go now, so we're going to give you a 50% share. Maybe that could happen. But until – I don't know. That just seems a little bit –
the guy that was chasing expansion is gone.
Yeah, and it just seems unprecedented. Like, nobody in the Power Five, other than when you're a new member to the conference and you go up to 100%, but nobody agrees to just take less money in perpetuity. And earlier today, before the Colorado stuff, there was reporting that the Big Ten said, we're not focused on expansion anymore. We're focused on transitioning USC and UCLA into the conference successfully. So I'm just skeptical of it's as easy as Oregon and Washington going to the Big Ten. And if they don't have anywhere to go, like they might not want to go to the Big 12, but they might not have another option if enough schools jump before them and they don't have a Big 10 invite.
If you could, if you, are you pausing, Kyle? If you could only add one school to make it 14 instead of 16, would that be Oregon? Also, going back to some comments, Ready to laugh. Canzano was on the radio when the news broke and he was speechless and panicking. The podcast of it is up now. That's going to be good to listen to. Chase says the Monty show was saying that the Big Ten vetted Cal, Stanford, Oregon, and Washington as a full package to add. I just don't believe that.
They would be there right now.
Yeah. And Cal and Stanford, they don't care. Like, if you move conferences, it's because you want your athletic department to be better. They don't care. Canyon, am I the only one that thinks Oregon State is a good ad? I don't.
At this point, I don't think they're like a bad ad. I think at this point you shoot for better teams
compared to Oregon.
Yeah, like you wait till Oregon, Washington, and the Four Corners tell you no, and then like if you need a second team out west to pair with Colorado because you don't want UConn or something, then I'm not opposed to looking at them. I do think I could be wrong. I'm not trying to like spread fake news, but you talked about renegotiating the TV deal. I read something today for the first time that there's a clause in the Big 12 contract that if we go into a new time zone, which at this point you're in all three except the Pacific time zone, that would reopen the contract. So like if you just need to take one school in the Pacific time zone because you think you can get more money, then like, yeah, take Oregon State or Wazoo or whoever. But I floated that out there as like a way to get others to jump. Like I would take Oregon State and Washington State if it meant collapsing the Pac-12. But now it looks like you might collapse it by taking Colorado and maybe Arizona. So I would hold off on Oregon State for now.
You know what? They've collapsed themselves. I don't want to say that the Big 12 is collapsing anything or killing anything. They've killed themselves because they don't have a TV deal. What are you taking them away from? Nothing. And for what it's worth, Colorado's coming home to the Big 12. So
that's true.
I don't really that's going to be the narrative. That's going to be the conversation, I'm sure, but it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I do think you asked me if I could only have one besides Colorado. I would have to do some more. It would be Oregon or Washington. Again, referencing our friend Jason Shear. He tweeted something a while back that the TV partners actually view Washington as more valuable than Oregon. I don't know where he got that from. I don't know if it's true. If it is true, I would say just take Washington because it's all about the Benjamins. But I don't know. I really want Arizona.
Is that the market thing?
What?
The Washington market is bigger than the Eugene market. Is that
No, he tweeted that Washington was more valuable to the TV executives and the media partners than Oregon was.
As a program.
Yeah.
Surprising.
So, as you know, Rob, I'm a big border conference guy, big border conference rememberer and respecter. Texas Tech has a history with Arizona. They've actually played Arizona more times in program history than 11 of their past, current, and future Big 12 opponents. And so if Arizona were to join with Colorado, besides like your in-state and Oklahoma State, Arizona would be the one that you have the most history with. And so even our current conference mates that we've been in with a quarter century now, like Kansas State, Iowa State, you have more history with Arizona. So I would love to see them. I'm hoping that Arizona flinches and comes with Colorado. And then once you have those two, I think maybe you can make a pretty serious play for Oregon and Washington. Those would certainly be in some order, like my top four. And I think if you got those four, you tell Arizona State and Utah, too bad. You had your shot.
My wish right now, I think, would be getting to 16 teams. And Arizona, Oregon, and don't care who else would be the third. UConn, Arizona State, whoever else.
I've long wanted the Arizona schools as a duo. I would take either Arizona school over Colorado. But I do thank Colorado for being the first to finally realize that the TV deal is not coming their way and to jump. But like in an ideal world, it already looks like Colorado's coming, so this isn't going to happen. But I would have taken the two Arizonas and Oregon and Washington and called it a day. But shout out to Colorado for having the stones to actually do it.
All right. Are you ready for a mailbag?
I think so. Did we cover everything we needed to, speculation wise?
I think so. Somebody asked, could y'all see Arizona State join the Big 12? I don't know at this point.
Yeah, I think if Oregon and Washington go Big Ten, the Pac is done, and then you would get Arizona State and Utah and be done with it. But I think there might be like 4 spots, and if you can get Oregon and Washington, I think Arizona State might be on the outside looking in. But one other thing you said, Rob, that I did want to touch on the idea of reopening the TV negotiations. I don't know what the language is there. I don't know if there's an automatic trigger. I don't know how amenable Fox and ESPN would be to say, like, hey, yeah, we'll just reopen it and potentially pay you more than what we've already agreed to and signed for 6 or 7 years. But if you had enough inventory, it seems like it would either need to get reworked or you could get an additional partner. And if you remember, part of the Pac-12 struggles was that, like, okay, Amazon, they were thrown out as a potential streaming partner. Well, Amazon didn't want what's called tonnage, which means they didn't want to carry 4 Pac-12 games every Saturday. They wanted 1 game of the week. And it was like the opposite with Apple. Apple wanted all or nothing, and the Pac-12 didn't want to be all streaming. So we know Amazon has an interest in streaming college football. We know that you're going to have to play on weeknights, especially if you're a 14-team or 16-team conference. Not everybody can play Saturday, or if they do, get ready for a lot of ESPN Plus. But I would rather be on Amazon Prime and get marketed and billed as some game of the week on a Friday night on Amazon, or 2 games Friday night, 1 is on ESPN, and then After Dark on ESPN2 or something. So I feel like there's meat on the bone, especially if you do get that Pacific time zone. You've got After Dark, you've got Amazon, you've got weeknights. I'm not talking max, I'm talking like Friday, ideally. But I feel like you have a case there to go back to the TV partners or rope in new partners and say, we want more, we have more inventory now, what can we do? Because we're new time slots, new days of the week. And I feel like you could go back and get more.
Yeah, more, maybe not more direct money, but more opportunity. Does that make sense? It all leads to more money, but you're not just getting for the same deal, more money for the same deal. You're getting a new deal, which would include more linear or different linear or streaming. Or you just allow them to let you add Amazon or Apple or whoever else isn't going to go to that Pac-12 deal.
I mean, it just stands to reason if you say, like, okay, we were going to have 2 or 3 games a week that were on the big channels, Fox, ABC, ESPN, and the rest was going to be FS1, ESPN Plus. But if we say, hey, we have 16 teams of inventory now, not 12, we're open to doing 1 After Dark every week or 1 more on Friday every week. If you're After Dark, it's not going to be ESPN Plus. It's going to be ESPN, and it's going to get more viewers than that same game being played at 11 a.m. on FS1 or ESPN Plus. So, I mean, I just don't see a way where you're not bringing more value to the media partners with 16 teams and some of them in the Pacific time zone. And so I feel like you'd be leaving a little bit of money on the table if you just said, okay, yeah, we'll stay at 32 million, because I think you'd be worth more than that if you make some of these additions, if others follow Colorado.
I think people are a little high on Oregon State football. They were good last year. But 2 wins, 5 wins, 2 wins, 1 win, 4 win, 2 win, 5 wins, 7 win, 9. Like, they're good once every 10 years. They had a really good run when I was in high school and college. But they've got a lot of 1 win, 2 win, 3 win seasons in the pack. I don't know. I just don't think they have pull that does anything. Now, I don't think Colorado generally does either right now. But historically, Colorado is a great ad because it's the first domino and they actually did it, and that allows other dominoes to fall because they're coming back to Texas where they were much better and much more viable on the recruiting trail. And it's kind of a good for both kind of thing.
You tweeted something. I don't think you were terribly serious, but you said, like, Colorado's in the bag. It's time for Nebraska to come home. I don't think that'll happen now, but a decade from now, if Colorado is winning with recruits in Texas and the money is closer, I wonder if Nebraska and if Nebraska is still bad at that point, would they go, hey man, we haven't won in 20 years.
Yeah.
Let's go back and play, especially if somebody would come with them, and who knows what the landscape will look like then. But if Colorado is kind of like a model of going back to the Big 12 and they find success, would Nebraska, Mizzou, A&M, Texas, or whoever, like if they go 7-5 every year in the SEC, they're like, hey man, let's go back and play, like what OU say, let's go back and play Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma State, and make the same amount of money we would in the SEC if the dollars are even by that point. I don't know if they would be.
Well, people keep commenting, the Big Ten has more money. The Big Ten revenue, $100 million. That deal's not done still, right?
No, they kind of, I think, made some promises. Here's the other thing that pissed me off about the reporting the whole time. When it's the Big 12 dollar amount getting discussed, it's only the TV number.
Yeah.
31.7 million. When it's the Big 10 and SEC, it's 100 million. But that's the all-in projection of what they'll make after TV, bowl games, college football playoff, March Madness. And so the Big 12's estimates, I think, like Mac Rhodes from Baylor, their athletic director said, we're going to eclipse 50 million. And so that doesn't take into account other revenue streams we've talked about that your market could capitalize on. And so it's two different numbers. Like their TV is 70-ish, we think. But even that, I think, has been jeopardized. Like I think they sold a certain number of conference championship games to not Fox. And Fox was like, well, hey, wait a minute. Like we were supposed to get 10 conference championship games. And now you're saying that like half are going to be on Fox, half are on CBS or whatever the case was. So, no, I think they're actually still ironing that out. And their TV number is not 100 million. That's their all-in number. Right.
And still 4 or 5 years away.
Yeah.
Because they're still at 60 or 70.
That's what, yeah. So if it doesn't quite pan out at 70, which was like the big astronomical number, let's say it's 65 or 68 after they iron out all those details. And let's say you reopen yours and you can get it to like 40 after Oregon, Washington come, and you've got After Dark content and Amazon ponies up. If you're at 40 and they're at 68, that's a lot different than 31 versus 70. Like you went from being more than doubled up to like maybe we're not quite in the same neighborhood, but we're in the same zip code. And I don't know. I feel like you could do quite a bit in terms of evening things out a little bit versus where you thought you would be 2 years ago or even a year ago.
Sorry, I was distracted. The Texas Rangers not getting swept. Your Texas Rangers up 13-3 in the 7th.
Let's go.
Very exciting. All right. Now are you ready for a mailbag?
Yes. New mailbag sponsor.
You've got mail.
Mail time.
Mail time. Mail time. The mail's here. Come on.
I found these in my mailbag.
Well, it's time to reach into the old mailbag here.
Enjoy reading the fan mail. Don't read it all at once.
Any mail for me?
You don't have a Tic Tac, do you?
Did I get any mail?
No.
Why not, honey?
You were saying?
New mailbag sponsor, right?
Yeah, did we decide that?
I think so.
We'll debut it.
For now. So a little bit of programming news, I guess. Gaucho's After Dark will be back in the fall to use that After Dark window, that fourth window, while the Pac-12 is getting dozens of viewers. You can ignore some crappy Cal versus Oregon State game and come tune into Gaucho's After Dark, sponsored by our friends over at Barnett, Howard, and Williams. We'll do that every college football Saturday. More of a look at kind of the Big 12 as a whole. And then, of course, we'll do our in-depth Texas Tech recap a little bit later on. So Barnett, Howard, and Williams will be sponsoring Gauchos After Dark again. We appreciate that. But in the meantime, while we're still, 38 days till kickoff? I think. Shout out to George Smith. Barnett, Howard, and Williams will be the sponsor of the Discord mailbag. If you want to submit a question, patreon.com/gamblinggauchos. got some cool stuff over there. You get access to the Discord server and putting out a lot of data visualization and returning production charts. Hopefully you find those useful if you're planning to bet on any Big 12 futures or season props, things of that nature. But Barnett, Howard & Williams, BHWLawFirm.com, the best law firm in the state of Texas. They handle all sorts of cases: catastrophic injury, criminal defense, Title IX, student litigation. 3 double Texas Tech grads. You can learn more at BHWLawFirm.com.
Into the mailbag. Will College Game Day be back in Lubbock this year? If so, who will be the celebrity guest? Who would be the celebrity guest?
I would have to look at the Kansas City Chiefs bye week schedule.
Let's say it's week 2 against Oregon, and then maybe a bye week for Mahomes late in the season, maybe against a TCU or a Kansas State.
Yeah, if it's Oregon, that's not going to be Mahomes because that's week 1 of the NFL. That ain't happening. Who would be a good celebrity guest for Tech versus Oregon? That's a good question. What do you think? Do you have somebody good in mind?
No, I was trying to think of some maybe country music guy. That's what they normally do. Josh Abbott. Trying to think of a couple of actors. Jesse Plemons did the K through 12.
Joey McGuire.
Grant McCasland. We're going to have somebody hot enough by then. Krista Gerlich. Who are we going to have? Already said it, Alex. Beans, and he can eat a worm.
I don't know.
Tech doesn't have a lot of celebrities.
No, we don't have a lot of celebrity firepower. Most of the ones we do are football. Like it'd be Cliff or Pat but they've all got jobs in the fall, so they can't.
Cliff doesn't.
Yeah, he's at USC with Lincoln.
He's an analyst.
Cooking up some brisket.
He's an analyst. Tuna, man. Cliff was eating that tuna.
Yeah, I don't know. Swing and a miss on that question. We stumped by the mailbag.
Stumped by the mailbag. I'll go Josh Abbott. Does your beer league team keep
we got the answer. Zach Thomas entering the Hall of Fame. He's unemployed. That'd be a good one. To have Zach Thomas in his gold jacket.
Is he unemployed?
Stage. Well, happily. I don't think he has to work.
You think he's doing that retirement thing?
In some form, I hope. He's earned it.
Are you in any rec leagues?
Not right now, but I was a intramural flag football champion at Texas Tech.
Did you keep stats?
No.
That was the question. Start, bench, process, cut, media, mediums. Vinyl, cassettes, CDs, streaming. I'm a stream guy.
Yeah, convenience, it's definitely streaming. Cassettes, there's no upside. It's not convenient and it's not classic, so we're cutting that.
I would bench vinyl, process CDs.
Yeah.
Do you have any vinyls?
Yeah, I got a pretty good collection.
I got Rusty Weir stacked deck behind me.
I've got
and a collection of NFL songs.
I'm trying to think. I've got some Johnny Cash for sure. Got some Aerosmith, Patsy Cline, Fleetwood Mac. I have to look at some of the other ones. I'll put some of that in the Discord.
Yes or no, the Jones only does the touchdown light show when the touchdown is meaningful and or we're still in the game.
I hope so. I don't want, if we're down 52-13 to Oregon and Taj runs one in, I don't want the fireworks going off.
I think it'll be every touchdown.
It would be kind of funny, too, if, like, Tarleton comes in the next week and, like, we just beat Oregon. We're ranked number 20 in the country, and it's, like, 70-3, and they're, like, doing the laser beams and everything. That'd be funny.
Yeah, up by 50, down by 50.
Take that, Tarleton.
Favorite ballpark in backyard baseball?
Man.
You know who would be a good guest picker?
Wes Welker.
Danny Amendola.
That'd be fun. Yeah, I think Wes is still employed. Danny's unemployed.
Yeah, Wes is working with the Dolphins.
I forgot the name of it, but I answered in there, right? It's the one where like the fence is even on both sides and you could just absolutely rake there.
Ekman Acres?
Yeah.
Somebody deleted your comment. I think I used to play at the Sandy Flats. Did you always use Pablo or?
Yeah, Pablo. I had all power guys, so Pablo like wasn't even in the middle of my lineup because I had like McGuire, Canseco, the Big Hurt. Like I had so Pablo's like in the 8 hole, but he's still like. I think I had Pete Wheeler and Kenny Lofton first, just get on base, and then just like dinger after that.
What would be your favorite military aircraft to do a flyover before the game?
Couldn't name one.
Do you like the big jets or the small, fast ones?
I kind of like the ones that look more like kind of like cargo planes.
Yeah, me too.
What I do think is cool, and I feel crazy for a few seconds, but like when I know there's going to be a flyover and you see like some birds take off from the north end zone and like you can't hear anything, you can't see anything yet. And I'll like turn to my wife and I'll be like, the flyover is a few seconds away. And so like the birds scatter and then a few seconds after that, they kind of come into view. I think that's really cool. So I'm pretty much a fan of any kind of flyover, but I like the quick, speedy jets, but I think also the large, more like kind of cargo-looking planes look pretty sweet.
The B-52, Steven says.
Yeah, B-52 is definitely one of my favorite military aircrafts.
Considering it seems almost impossible to make it through a full season with a healthy starting quarterback, which team would have the best shot with a Big 12 title with at least half of the games being played by the backup?
Off top, Texas Tech. And that's not just me being a homer. You've got a guy who's – Joey said this at media days. You're the only school in the conference that has 2 guys that have started and won Big 12 football games. I think Baylor, there's probably not much of a drop-off between QB1 and QB2. I'm trying to think. Kansas, honestly, if they were in contention, I don't think there's a huge drop-off. I think Jalen Daniels is really good, but I think Jason Bean played really well last year when
that offense is so complete.
Yeah.
That you can just kind of plug in at quarterback.
Yeah, those are my 3 answers: Tech, Baylor, and Kansas.
Power rank the Picadors based on how you think they'd perform in a zombie apocalypse. I know Keith could go with his tent truck and live off in Montana somewhere and just fish and eat. So I'd probably rank him pretty high. Chuck, who asked this question, Swamp Donkey, I feel like he thinks he should be listed highly.
I think Bithen would do all right for himself.
Butthead?
You know who I would not want in the zombie apocalypse, and this is not like a call out, but I feel like Root would just be memeing the whole time. He'd be like more like zombie dumb apocalypse, and be like, "Hey man, we're fighting for our lives here, Root. I need you focused in the foxhole."
Oh, fair enough.
He'll be like zombie apocalypse. That was the worst Cranberry song. I don't know. I feel like Root would just have a bunch of.
But his would be funny.
Yeah.
Mario says, me on the not list.
Good to know.
Chase has a bunch of guns, apparently. I wouldn't say that on the internet, but
I said no offense, Alex.
Yeah, no offense. Bless your heart, Alex.
No offense, but you're a real moron.
If
Not really.
your former AD and father-in-law were invited to watch a game on the sidelines by Joey while on speakerphone, how would you invite yourself?
First things first, I totally thought we had the husband of Gerald Meyer's daughter in the Discord for a second when that question was first asked.
Me too.
I was like, wait a second, Mr. Loco, are you but he clarified it's his high school AD. I think Maddie actually had a great response to this. You call him up, the weekend of the game and say, hey man, like I've got nothing to do. Are you doing anything that weekend? Maybe we should hang out, and then kind of like force their hand saying, well, I'm going to the Tech game. You should come with me. Or they could betray you and just lie and be like, oh yeah, I'm out of town that weekend. Sorry, you're on your own.
I think he's in the room when the call happens from Joey.
Yeah, but you play it off a few weeks later like, oh, was that same date? Is that what game that is?
Fair enough.
So I liked Maddie's answer on that.
True or false, if numbers were crunched, I know you like to crunch numbers, there would be no statistical evidence to show traveling longer distances for games has a negative impact on win-loss record, and this baseless narrative is way overplayed. I know in the NFL the numbers have been crunched, and going cross-country does affect win-loss records, but you don't have any true cross-country coast-to-coast games. And it's not miles traveled. It's like New York to Seattle or Tampa Bay to Los Angeles, where your clock's all messed up.
Yeah, I do. The question was phrased in such a complicated way. I don't know how to answer true or false. So I'll just say that I think there is an effect if you go from Seattle to Miami to play a football game. And this was actually a point, Rob, in the book that I read on sports betting and that I recommended to you. The author brought up a good point, and he actually used this as an example. But he said, if you think that there's a unique condition of a game, like Miami is traveling to Seattle to play the Seahawks, that could impact the spread, like the travel, it stands to reason that a team traveling half that far would also be affected by travel, but to not quite the same extent. So he's like, if you feel like you're going to bet based on 25-mile-an-hour winds or freezing temperatures, like you have to sort of calibrate that for all travel, all cold weather, all wind, and say, okay, well, if a 25-mile-an-hour wind means nobody can kick a field goal, an 18-mile-an-hour wind means they can kick them, but they're going to be inaccurate, and a 12-mile-an-hour wind means that they're slightly less accurate. So all that to say, I think there is an effect, but like you're saying, the longest anyone would travel right now, I think it's UCF to Provo, and I don't even know if they play each other. So,
yeah, and I think UCF is who he's talking about. There's a graphic in here from miles traveled that BYU and UCF are going to travel more than everyone else. West Virginia won 8 games in the Big 12 several times, and nobody was complaining about their travel except for West Virginia. And in Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Cincinnati are all going to travel the same amount. Kansas State has the least amount of travel at 3,200 miles total.
how'd they get away with that? Doesn't Texas only lead the state twice?
And they're at 4,100.
All right, was this conference play only, maybe? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But, I mean, hey, everybody has to do it. Like, going from Lubbock to Ames isn't across the country, but it's pretty far. And, like, we had to do that in late November when it was freezing last year. So, like, sorry, but it's football. It's a grown man's sport. You might have to travel a bit for the game.
I would say the only time it matters is if you're playing like BYU to Florida or Florida to BYU, and it's 11 a.m. or early game, like Haley says right here.
Yeah, also like in the NFL, if you play Sunday and then you play Thursday, like on the other side of the country.
Start bench cut being called these by Bid Hen, Buddy Pal Haas.
Man, I think I'll start Haas, bench Buddy, cut Pal.
Pal is the worst.
If you call me Pal, I feel like you're about to want to hit me.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Like, in what context could you use Pal that isn't antagonistic, irritated, all that?
Yeah. Maybe we're just a couple of pals.
I guess, but like if you refer to me as pal. If you're like, oh, is that right, pal? I'd be like, oh, he's calling me pal.
It's perking up.
Yeah.
Haley. We have
You can't even say it.
Yes, we have a soundboard.
Dog.
The often utilized soundboard.
Often. When we were together, it was better. But in the same place.
In so many ways, Rob.
You know what I mean.
It's always better when we're together.
How are you going to pronounce tweeting now that it's x.com?
Yeet.
Yeeting?
I'm still just gonna call it Twitter and tweets. I don't care if it's X and Zeets or whatever. It's Twitter.
I'm gonna call it Twitter.
Yeah.
Let's see. Soaking it in. What's your go-to karaoke song? I think we've answered this before.
Man, define go-to. It all depends. Like if it's a duet, it's Summer Nights from the Grease soundtrack. If I want to do a Creed impersonation, it's My Sacrifice.
What about Home by Chris Daughtry?
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm going home to the place where I belong.
The latest one I did was My Own Worst Enemy by Lit.
Okay.
That one's fun. It's easy to do, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a portfolio, a repertoire. It's not just one go-to.
Okay. A repertoire.
Is
there going to be a pick it or pick 'em this year?
There was last year. Maybe if we get it sponsored, which, by the way, if you want to sponsor the Gambling Gauchos and reach millions and billions of people, hit us up. Billions and billions. DM us, email us. We're not hard to find. But football season that's like maximum exposure, especially if we win 10 games. So hit us up.
Start, bench, cut, Oregon, Washington, Arizona.
Yes.
That order.
Probably so.
A couple of BYU questions here. Spencer answered most of them, I think. Do you know what the Antelope Islands are?
Mm-mm.
Do you know what the pink sand dunes are?
I'm assuming.
I know the white sands.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with the salt flats, but I've never been to the salt flats. Do you want to start, bench, cut those three things, or do you just want to move on?
Next.
I think that's it. There you go. There it was. That's the mailbag. The BHW mailbag.
Were you looking for a button there?
I was just seeing what we had.
Haley says he's got a fever, and the only prescription is more soundboard.
We can do that. Oh, we have a couple of voicemails we need to get to. Maybe not tonight, but maybe next week we can get to a voicemail.
Yeah, next week we're almost at 100 minutes of us.
Yeah, we don't need to do it tonight. It's a long voicemail. I have it on the board though. It's from a Kansas State fan called Wildcat Willie.
Ryan says, "Do the final thoughts drop." Do we have one?
Is that an Izod polo? I don't know why Izod is so funny.
I don't know why. That's random.
No, we don't have a final thoughts drop yet.
Go Raiders!
What's your final thoughts, Kyle?
From small seeds, big trees grow.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there anything that made you think of that, or
let that resonate with you, listener?
From
ponder
small
that.
Seeds, big trees grow. Is that Confucius?
No, that's a Norwegian proverb.
Okay.
But there's a Chinese proverb: "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step," and I feel like those are simpatico.
There's a proverb about faith like a mustard seed.
From mustard seeds, mustard trees grow.
All right, that's all I got.
Love y'all.